on to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Jody Lynn, as you know, we often talk about the various different ways people have challenges, and we talk very often about those crash and burn situations, right? Where we've had them ourselves. We both experienced that. Most of our guests have experienced that kind of thing. What we don't often talk about, though, is what could have been done to avoid it. Right? Because usually you go through something and then you learn and you say, well, yeah, I wish I had known that, but okay, I'm learning from this. And I developed this new thing as a result. And sometimes I developed a new course or wrote a book about it or, whatever. But we usually don't actually say, well, we could have stopped it.
True.
We could have prevented it. So I'm kind of hopeful that that's going to be something that we learn about today, because our guest, Hannah Tackett, is an expert at how to avoid burnout, which of course is directly tied to those crash and burn situations. So I don't know about you. I'm kind of ready to find out, see if there is a solution there. All right. So Hannah, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're glad to have you too. You and your program, your Serene Success, which is a very interesting name, but it's also the title of your podcast.
Yes, it is.
That's pretty cool. How long have you been doing that?
So the podcast is pretty new. So that'll be launching later this month. We're recording in July. So very fresh and new. Yes.
Yeah. Congratulations. That's always an exciting decision to make. I know from personal experience. I know Jody Lynn knows also because she has her own. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Are you excited?
I am. Yes. It's something that has been tickling the back of my mind for a long time. And so finally being able to say, I'm doing it. Here we go.
I can't actually call it a calling, although some people would say that, but it's a very firm nudging. Let's put it that way.
A pull, right? Like you're being pulled in that direction. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So cool. Very good. So tell us about how you ended up being Serene Success, because that's, I'm sure, where the story comes in. And let's get the whole thing started that way.
Absolutely. So my journey that has led me to where I am today in helping other women prevent and end burnout started, of course, with my own burnout. I spent 16 plus years in tech. And at one point I was so fried that I couldn't get out of bed. And it scared me because I had babies at home to take care of. I had this career that I had invested quite a bit of everything in myself to make happen. And my marriage and like this, basically I had a beautiful life that I didn't want to fall apart. And there I was in bed miserable and I couldn't get up, and I went to the doctors and nothing was actually wrong with me other than that I was fried. And in those moments, in that darkness, I decided that, first of all, I'm going to figure this out. We're going to turn this around. And second, this is never happening again. This will never happen again. I can't afford it to happen again, because I don't want to fail as a mother. I don't want to fail as a wife. I don't want to go bankrupt. I have to be able to show up for what I've built here. So that was the pivotal moment for me. And since then, my journey has taken me a few places. And then ultimately, though, I've ended up with helping others end their burnout and turn it around and re-engage with life with passion and fulfillment.
My own background is a tech background and IT background as well. And I was self-employed in an IT created position, so to speak, in 2008 when my business got wiped out.
Yeah.
So I know something about what that's like, because I also know what I went through the next 4 years. And my listeners know ad nauseum because I tell the story over and over again. But I know what it's like to be pushing really hard to put that together again. Basically put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and to be hating it. And that'll burn you out real fast. So I kind of wonder. It sounds like perhaps there was a similarity going on there.
Yes, there was a lot going on. And often when I'm talking to people about how we end up being burnt out, so there's these 5 common success traps that I feel like many of us high achievers fall into, right? These are the behaviors that can lead to success, that drive us to success, that when out of balance can lead us to burnout. And I definitely exhibited them. But so that's like the people pleasing, you're trying to keep your boss happy, your kids happy, your clients happy, your spouse happy. And ultimately your needs are, last on the list.
Right.
There's, that perfectionism, having the impossibly high standards and high attention to detail, and you couldn't possibly let somebody else help you because they won't do it as well as you. And then there's,
We've never done that. No, never, ever.
I'm very guilty. I did that for years of my life. And then there's the helping, like you see people who need help, whether they're coworkers, whether they're clients, whether they're, your own children or your family. And then you start to overextend yourself and pick up the problems and responsibility of others. And that can also drive you to burnout if it's out of balance. And then there's my favorite, which is overachieving, that being busy all the time, almost like to be busy makes you feel worthy. And I know in the, hustle culture, there's definitely that trap of feeling like, well, if I'm double booked all day, then I'm valuable. It means I'm providing meaning or something. Where in reality, being too busy all of the time and, having the never ending checklist that, as soon as you accomplish one thing, you're on to the next without pausing, without appreciating, without acknowledging, that can easily end in burnout. And then there's the typical fear of saying no that kind of comes with the rest of those that I've seen a lot of people exhibit. And so those are the things that, like, the behaviors that, while they can drive us to success, out of balance or rooted in fear, they can definitely drive us to burnout. And I hear what you're saying with that, hating it, like that loathing of your job, because that is definitely one of the symptoms or one of the signs, red flags, that you are either in a burnout or you're on your way there.
Yes. And when you're in that loop, which is that's what I can think of to be describing it, you don't see how you can get out.
Right. Yeah, it feels endless.
Yeah.
It's a dark place to be. And I think most people, like you said, like burnout feels like you either loathe your job, or in my case, it was like a physical collapse, like literally. And it looks different for different people.
Sure.
But the thing is, like, it's something that is actually sneaking up on us over time. Like, it doesn't happen overnight.
Right. Yeah, it's not like there were no warning signs.
Right.
There was a lot.
Oh my God, like I woke up this morning and I burned out.
That's how it feels though. You're like, and I can't get up.
And I can't get up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, does any of that sound familiar, Jody Lynn? Just like,
oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, people pleasing, yep. Perfectionism, yep. Desire to help or overhelp, yep. A busy badge, I've been there. Fear of saying no, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all of those things. And it's interesting because I could see different times in my life where I've done all of that and gone through the burnout pattern. And Hannah, just like you, was like drooling, staring at a wall by the end of the week. Like, I can't talk. I can't think. I can't even feed myself. Like, I'm so tired. I can't feed myself.
Sometimes
like
you're on screen. I mean, it's just awful.
Yeah. 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 And it's interesting because you can see these things coming, but it really does feel like, how do you stop? Because now it's really ingrained that I say yes to people and I help, and who am I without these things? So Hannah, what do you suggest if you are somebody listening right now, recognizing, I am those things, all of them or combinations of them, and I am burning out. Now what?
So what I found was, like, the surprising key to ending burnout was authenticity, which sounds very woo. And you're probably wondering, like, what on earth does that have to do?
We're all about the woo, Hannah. Go. Yeah.
Okay.
We're in for it.
You barely even touched woo. Woo is where you're about 3 degrees out from there. Then you have woo woo, which is like so far out there. You've touched the W of woo. That's about how far out you are.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So authenticity. And what I mean by this is, like you're saying yes to all these things, or maybe you're not saying yes or no, you're just defaulting to doing whatever ends up on your plate and you're in a reactive state. And even just kind of going through life and like, we're all picking up messages as we're going along, all these stories about ourselves and about what success is and what we're supposed to be doing with our time and energy. And we end up picking up a lot of like shoulds. I should be making homemade dinners for my family every single night. I should be responding to all of these emails right away. I should be jumping at every opportunity that comes anywhere close to me. I should go to every single meeting that ends up on my calendar. And there's a lot of assumptions and things that we're just kind of almost on autopilot living in these shoulds. And so the first step is really to recognize that the shoulds, the expectations, your mother's vision of success for you, your colleagues' way of succeeding, the things that you've picked up in your life don't necessarily mean that you have to go and be and do all of that. And the key is really just like letting go of the shoulds, ditching the shoulds, and really tuning in with your own values and understanding what is important to you right now in this phase of life. Because if you're still marching to what was important to you 5 years ago, you might be feeling resentful. You might be off track because your values may have changed. And so getting into alignment with your own values, like understanding what your yes is, what do you want to say yes to in your life is so, so critical, because once you know what yes means to you, like what do you want in your life? Where are you going? What is your vision? What matters to you today? Once you have a yes, then it becomes so much easier to say no, because everything you say yes to is an automatic no. And if you're saying yes to everything without being strategic, you probably aren't going where you want to go. And so that's why it's like identifying your yes, identifying your values is so critical, because it gives you that thing to stand on, something to stand on when you are saying no to the noise, to the distractions, to the shoulds, to the expectations of the world. And that just making that shift is pretty pivotal.
Well, also, doesn't it kind of beg the question, because you have to actually know what your values are. You actually have to know what's important to you. You have to know what you really want. I'm always amazed how many times people can't answer that question.
It is so common. That's like when I work with people, that's like the first quarter of what we do together is figure out what they want. Because it's so true, especially if you are a people pleaser, if you are someone who says yes to everything. I know I for sure lost my sense of self. I mean, if you asked me what I wanted to eat for dinner, I was like, I don't know. What do you want to watch on Netflix? I don't know. Where do you want to go in your career? I don't know. I'm just filling the gaps. I see all these problems and these gaps, and I'm just the putty that's keeping things from exploding. The dam's going to explode.
I don't have time to think about what I want.
I don't have time to think about what I want. I'm in reactive emergency mode right now.
Yeah.
So you're right. And just like one of like a simple, like instead of spending, an hour doing a deep dive coaching session, like a simple way to kind of get closer to what you want, or identifying what it is that you do want or don't want, is to pay attention to your energy levels. Mm-hmm. So like literally how you feel in your body when you're doing something. Mm-hmm. And a simple, very tactical exercise that, our listeners can do is like you look at your calendar for the week, and, you can color code like red and green, right? So what is filling your cup? What gives you energy? What activities, people, places, things lift you up, fill you with energy, and which ones drain you? And just that alone is going to start giving you some awareness of the direction that let's call it your gut or your soul or your calling is pulling you, because the things that energize you are going to be more in line with what is valuable to you.
Mm-hmm. That's an important distinction, I think. And the reason I think it's important is that we often end up, particularly in careers, where we're doing stuff that we don't really like. We've kind of talked ourselves into it, maybe. Mm-hmm. Or, we say, oh, well, that's where the money is, so I'll go where the money is. Or I mean, it's kind of alarming to me how often I'll have a conversation. I'll be, out on a vacation or something, and walk into a gift shop and get a conversation going with the person behind the counter. Oh, you're in school and you're working in a resort town, and so what are you studying and all that? Where are you going to go with that? And they have no idea. Like the best answer they can have is, well, I figured that's where the money is. And I practically melt down when I hear that, because I know where that leads. When you're just following the money, that leads to exactly what we're talking about here. It leads to a burnout at the very least.
Yes. And that's how I got to my burnout. I chose the career partially based on interest, but also I wanted to make more money. I was sick of being broke,
Mm-hmm.
and that was in alignment with my value system. I was like, I don't want to be poor anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this. This isn't fun. I want to be able to afford things. I want good health insurance. Like, let's take a path that's going to get me there. Um, I think where people, and there's nothing wrong with chasing money. You can have money and wealth and success and be fulfilled and energized by the work that you're doing and having an impact. I think where we get derailed is when we feel like we have to succeed the same way other people do.
Mhm.
You see like that person's making lots of money. I think I can do that too. I'm just going to do it. And then you got it like this, I'm either succeeding or I'm not, this dichotomy in your mind. Whereas the reality is there are many paths to success. And why you might start that way, like, I don't know, not really sure where I'm going, but I'm going to aim that direction. But check in, because as you're going, your body's going to give you feedback. Your gut's going to give you feedback. Listen to it, because there are changes that you can make. You don't have to succeed exactly like them or exactly like you think you have to. There's so many paths to success, so many ways to do it. That finding the way to success that fills your cup, that is in alignment with your values, is truly the path to fulfillment.
I'm thinking about my own journey through life, particularly in my younger years, and how I wasn't just following the money. I was following the money along a path that, in theory, was going to get me to the money easiest, regardless of whether or not I liked it.
Right.
I mean, I was good at, this is the interesting thing for me. I have always been very good at IT type stuff. I mean, literally, I got my first exposure to computers before the first PCs came out in the early 1980s.
Mhm.
I got my first exposure in high school when my high school, surprisingly, had a programming department, like a very early computer basic programming class that I took. And I took to it fairly easily. And then when the PCs and the early Macintosh and the early Apples came out, I was able to pick them up and use them pretty easily. I mean, they made sense to me, much more so than they did to most people. But I didn't love it.
Mm-hmm.
It was not that big. And so but I made a career out of it, especially early on, because I was one of the few people who knew how to use a computer. So people, oh yeah, hire that guy right now. We're going to have him teach the whole department how to make this thing work.
Right.
So it was a great career opportunity builder. But at the end of the day, I didn't really have a passion for it at all. It was not fun. It was not enjoyable. And later on, I created a career for myself. When I left corporate to become a web developer, web designer, and web hoster, and did that for a number of years. But when the business crashed, now the business crashed on a direct level. It crashed because of the 2008 financial crisis, because all of my clients at that time were all very local, very small nonprofit organizations. And of course, in a financial crisis, nobody gives money to a nonprofit. So all my clients disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a definite contributing factor. But I think it's fair to say that one of the reasons I went down that road was because I wasn't enjoying it. So that was that was like the easy way to have that career, like to have that company building up. Like, well, I'll just work with the local nonprofits. And I never really considered the possibility that could actually be a problem, like in a financial crisis. I mean, how often do we have financial crises? Like once every 80 years or something. So it was not like I was expecting the cycle to come along. But it did, and it kind of caught me unawares. And then when it came time to have to do something about that, well, not only did my business disappear, but at the time I was married, my wife's business also disappeared at the same time. So our entire income went kablooey within about a month. And there was really nothing to do except just try to put the pieces back together again. So here I am trying to put the pieces back together on something that I was fairly good at, but I was so tired of doing it. And I had no desire to keep doing it. Literally, that to me, one of the biggest things that a person needs to do is not only identify what their values are, what's important to them, but also what their passion is.
Right.
I mean, when I have those conversations with the young people who are manning the counter behind in a store in a resort town or something like that, I'll ask them, "What are you passionate about?" Talk about getting blank looks. You get a lot of blank looks on that question. Like, oh, I don't know. I had never thought about it.
True. And I feel like most of us have experienced, like, I don't know if we would label it as passion, because I'm thinking like when you're a kid or like when you're young enough that the shoulds haven't buried you alive. Um, there are things that draw your interest that you get excited about, and you have that youthful joyous reaction to
Mhm.
a thing or a something or an experience. And I feel like that's super helpful as an adult to kind of tap into, like, what brought you that joy,
Mm.
before
Yeah.
before you became this person that is a slave to making the money so that you aren't broke, so that you don't have to experience the recession again. Because I mean, that's legitimate. We have to eat. We have to,
Mhm.
have a house. I get it. And I do definitely, I'm come from part of my burnout was I'm coming from a place of scarcity. I grew up, my parents were not
Yeah.
very particularly wealthy. I also had a business go out under in 2008.
Oh, we have
Good
that in
times,
common. How
yes.
fun.
So I relate to that story. And only I was sick of my business too. And I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm going to go back to school, take a different path.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so it is about, okay, we have these requirements, right? So my requirements are I have to be able to keep the roof over our heads, feed my children, provide a certain level of lifestyle. I don't want to be poor, obviously. And I want to have a certain level of impact on others in a way that is fulfilling to me. And there's also things outside of work, right, that are passions. So, like I moved across the state, after my burnout. I was like, what fills my cup? One of the questions, what excites me? What have I loved, in the before? And nature was one of the answers. I'm like, how can I get closer to nature? I live in the middle of an urban center and I work all of the time. There's
Mm.
no space or time for me to experience nature in my life right now. Um, so what I ended up doing was asking my job, I want to move, can I work remote full time and live in the forest? And they said yes, surprisingly. I sat on that question for 8 months. I was terrified of asking. And when I finally asked, it was just so easy. I was shocked.
Mm.
So there's something about, learning how to ask for what you want and being willing to
Yeah.
receive it. So, but anyways, we moved across the state. I now live 4 minutes away from a forest, and now I go hiking on a regular basis. And it's not just finding like the work that fills your cup. It's also like not forgetting the things that brought you joy, and
Mhm.
not what I find a lot of women doing is deprioritizing those joy bringing activities because they're like, it doesn't matter. It's not important. Like I had one
Doesn't
client,
make me money.
it doesn't make me money. Yeah. It's like I had this one client and she was going downhill, right? This long gradual, burnout essentially, where it was impacting her performance at work. She went from being a top performer to being put on a performance review. When she came into my program, that's kind of where she was at.
Mhm.
And, in our process, I was like, well, what fills your cups? What kind of energy giving activities have you experienced in your life that maybe you're not doing right now? And she said knitting. I'm like, okay. I'm like, how can we add knitting back in? She's like, well, I feel guilty if I knit because I'm not
Mm.
working. I feel like I have to keep working because I'm doing poorly at work. And I'm like, it's actually kind of counterintuitive. But if you work less and you knit more, when you do work, you're going to do a better job.
Yeah.
And so, she made that shift and she started adding things back into her life that she enjoyed and loved and had previously eliminated because it wasn't taking care. She's a single mom. So it wasn't childcare and it wasn't work. If it wasn't those two things, she felt guilty about doing it.
Wow.
And it's letting go of that guilt and realizing like, oh, these indulgences, these things that make us happy are not indulgences. They are requirements. They are part of what makes us people and human. And like, they're going to accelerate our productivity.
It's funny too because the financial crisis and my own personal financial crisis that accompanied and followed afterward are what led me to my passion.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about a career passion. I'm talking about doing this podcast. Because literally, I started this podcast in 2012 because I was trying to figure out why I couldn't resurrect my business, why I was having so much trouble with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I certainly have never asked myself the question, well, why am I pursuing something that I don't love at all? It was not on my list of questions to ask. And I'd heard about the law of attraction. So I figured, well, maybe some answers are in there. So I decided to have a podcast and bring experts on. The part that caught me by surprise was how much I love doing it. And the lesson that I take from that is what would have happened if I hadn't tried doing the podcast in order to solve my problem? Because I could easily have talked myself out of that.
Mhm.
There were lots of reasons not to do it, especially at that time, because at that time, if you wanted to start a podcast, you had to really be committed to doing it, because it was not easy. It's not like you could
Mhm.
just go, sign up with some service somewhere and, okay, now you have a place to store your podcast records and another place to do all your recording. You had to figure all of that out on your own. At that time, it just wasn't a thing yet.
Right.
It'd been around for a few years, but it's not like everybody was doing it. So I had to be really committed to figuring out how to make the whole thing work. But once I made it work, I found, my God, this is fun. This is really great. This is like, oh, this is energy building. This is something that I could do this every single day. Is there a way I can get paid to do this? This is fun.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And I love it when people stumble into, or they feel like that urge, like you said, that pull, like I'm feeling a tug to go in this direction,
Yeah.
to be able to explore that with curiosity and not judge yourself
Mhm.
and let yourself experience it and be open to that. Because I think some of the most beautiful, like talk about serendipity and, the universe realigning itself to kind of get you to where you really belong happens like that. You feel a pull, you're curious about something sparks your interest. And then you start taking steps in that direction. And it can be really amazing what unfolds when we're not trying to force something, when we're not rigid about how something has to unfold.
Which I was
Mhm.
100% skilled at.
As am I, yes. Very good at planning and designing and making sure things are exact. Yeah.
I always say it's good to have a skill in life, but you might want to be selective about which one you pick. That's probably not the one you want to put at the top of the list.
Yeah. It's all about the balance.
So give us some ideas about how we achieve that balance.
Right. So we talked about authenticity, right? Stepping into alignment with your values and developing an awareness of what is energizing you and what is draining you. And so those are, two key, fairly not necessarily straightforward, but the energy one is fairly straightforward steps to kind of get you on the path out of burnout. And then I also put together a framework that has been working really, really well over and over again to get people out of burnout, right? So I call it the peace method. And so the first one is to pursue your yes, which we talked about, stepping into authenticity and getting clarity on what matters to you in this season of life and ditching the shoulds. The second is energizing your being. And that's where we prioritize our own care, where we would prioritize loving ourselves, which so many of us feel guilty about doing. And so that's eating for energy, improving our sleep, connecting with loved ones, having joyful movement in your life, adding those activities that you love and enjoy and bring light and happiness to you, learning how to reset your nervous system and, releasing that trauma. So there's that energizing phase. So, and then once you've got that energy back, right, because you've built yourself up again, at that point, learning how to assert your voice, learning how to ask for what you want and get it, learning the ways to say no and gaining confidence in your no's, and then addressing the sabotage that could be going on in that space. And then the fourth step is claiming your surplus. So at this point, you've got the energy and you're asserting your voice, asking for what you want and getting it. And you're going to end up with more time and more energy once you're doing these things. And so when you're claiming that time and energy for yourself and for your vision and for, moving towards the direction that you're called, that's what I kind of consider like elevating, that success. And so that's essentially the framework and the journey that I've been helping women go on to end their burnout, ditch the dread, stop self-loathing, stop beating yourself up and step into your own power.
I don't know about you, Jody Lynn, but as she was listing the 5 pieces to the peace formula, when she mentioned the sabotage portion, that was the one that jumped out at me. Like,
Yeah.
how often have I sabotaged myself? How often do I hear about others sabotaging themselves? I don't know this is true, but I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that probably jumped out to a lot of listeners.
So
And one of those
sabotage
things,
is
I don't want to really admit it, but I mean, I do it. I have this long history of sabotaging myself. I think I'll just forget about that because that's not a comfortable step.
well, the thing is like, so, but when I'm putting this process together, when I'm going through this process of coaching and in going through the process of healing my own self, like Sabotage is a part of the journey. So you plan for it, you prepare for it, you address it, you bake it in, right? Expect it. Because as an adult, any kind of change or any kind of learning, so you're learning a new behavior, you're learning a new way of thinking about the world, you're learning new ways to show up at work or, within your own reality. Um, Anything new is change. And so we have to do some change management. And change management is dealing with that critter brain, that we have that wants to keep things the same. It wants to keep us safe. It doesn't want things to change. It's trying to prevent pain, which is wonderful. It's there. It has good intentions, right? But pretending like it's not there and that it's not going to flare up and sabotage your efforts, like that's not helpful, right? Or even being super judgmental of yourself, like I sabotage, I'm such an awful person, I'm such a failure. Like, no, you're not. You're normal. You're human. We all do it. It's part of the process. It's just, does your system that you're following, is the process that you're working through, account for that and bake it in? Like we should all expect it to happen.
You just also demonstrated to me that you do have the IT background, because you use the phrase change management, which is a buzzword within the IT industry. For somebody who isn't in IT, you may not know that, but that's like a major deal that happens to everybody who is in IT. It's just part of it.
Yeah, that's fun stuff.
But it's an important part because, I mean, in the IT industry, change management is about making sure that when some sort of a new technological change is being put in place, everybody's ready for it and it's going to go smoothly. Really, the same principle applies in life, though. I think that's why you brought that phrase in, because you do have to manage the change. It's a skip. Yeah, it's a skip, right? It's a step that we very easily skip if we don't have a habit of doing that, of incorporating it into what we're doing.
Exactly. I feel like so many of us, it's like we get an idea, like I know this is going to be good for me. I'm going to start this new habit tomorrow. And then it falls apart and we're like, I don't know why. And usually it's like we didn't, there's a couple of things going on there. One is maybe we didn't create the environment for success. And the other is not planning and addressing sabotage head on.
Just hoping that you wouldn't be sabotaged.
Or thinking like, because it's the right thing to do, that it's just going to work.
Yeah. I have the willpower.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to ask you, Jody, which part was jumping out, but I think you just told me.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's like, I love what you're talking about, Hannah, in the planning for the sabotage. What came into my mind was planning for the saboteur to rear its beautiful head. But we don't. We just think like, oh yeah, I'll make this change and it'll be, it might be difficult at first, but I can like muscle my way through it. And I loved how you were talking about it's okay. Like that's a part of being human. That's a part of your system. Because I think that's a big misconception in our society is like, oh, I can just have the willpower, or, I have no willpower, so I'm not disciplined and I'm not this and I'm not that. Well, no, if you've been doing things a certain way, your body, your systems, your brain, it's all working together, and that's what it knows, and that's what it's familiar with, and that's what's safe. It's become safe. You do everything for a reason. It might not make sense so much logically, but you do it for a reason. So of course you're going to run up with resistance. And I like that, giving yourself that grace and planning for it. Like I am going to be resistant to this change because knitting doesn't feel like work. And if you're in any sort of like sales capacity or something like that, you're like, oh my God, I'm knitting. I'm not doing the work that I should be doing. There's a client that's calling me right now. I should be answering it. There's an email coming in. I should be answering it. Like you get into this overdrive and then you can't even sit and knit or do whatever it is that you wanted to do because you're driving yourself crazy. You got to plan for that to happen to your body, your brain, your systems to go into shock first and be like, what the hell are we doing? Why?
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. It's like jumping into a pool that's cold, it'll be sting a little at first and then it'll be fine.
Right. And I love how you mentioned like that path. And I've heard analogies where, our behaviors and our our routines are essentially like following a path through the forest. Like there's a well-worn path. We've followed it every single day for the past 6 years, and now we want to go and make a new path.
Yeah.
Do we have our machete ready? Do we have the right gear on? Are we covered? Or do you
have a compass? Where are we going?
Yeah. Are we ready to get out there and make a new path? And so there's resistance to making a new path, and there's effort involved, and expecting that like is part of the journey.
I'm still wondering though, how do you plan for sabotage? I mean, do you put it on your calendar Friday, 3 p.m. sabotage? Okay. It's on the calendar. I'm planning for it.
I think the first thing is realizing that when sabotage happens, like realizing before it happens, first of all, it's going to happen. So just knowing it's going to happen is helpful. And then the second, realizing, okay, when something comes up and sabotages me, whether my own fears, doubts, whether I start blaming other people, whether I find excuses, or maybe something random happens in my life that kind of blocks me for a minute, expect it. It's going to happen. Second, view it with curiosity. Like, isn't this interesting that I am being critical of myself right now and I'm afraid of getting on this phone call? Isn't this interesting that I am lying in bed and I don't want to get on the Peloton today? Isn't that interesting? And if you take that non-judgmental, curious mind when things that happen that are, sabotaging your desires and your goals and your objectives, you're much more likely to get through it to the other side than if you immediately start self-shaming, because shame will shut you down. It stops us in our tracks. It sucks the energy out of us. So sabotage is going to happen. Sabotage is not wrong. Sabotage is not bad. You are not bad. You don't have a lack of willpower. There's something wrong going on. You're just normal. This is part of the process. But shifting our mindset around it and stopping the judgment is really the key to getting through it.
It's a really important point.
I think that this premise is so important because there's so much information that you can learn from this curiosity standpoint, from not being judgmental, just trying to learn about yourself. I would teach this in the abundance practice, because there was this example of, I was going through the last 3 months. This was a long time ago, but I went through the last 3 months of what I spent. And, I'm very budgeted, whatever, right? And you look at the budget and then you look at what you spent and you're like, what? Huh? How do I spend? Yeah. What? I stuck to my budget. I can tell you I stuck to my budget. And then you look at the last 3 months and you're like, oh, wow. I spent, I think it was like $600 on fast food. And in that moment, it was that realization of like, there's two routes here. I could beat myself up because I didn't stick to my budget, or I can get curious about why didn't I stick to my budget? Like, why am I doing this? And for me in that moment, what was happening, it's like, okay, well, do you love these fast food providers? McDonald's, I'm Canadian, so Tim Hortons, when are you going to these places and do you love them? No, I don't love them. I'm not going there for my coffee. And so I started to get really curious about like, what was the pattern? I would wake up early and I would be in this state of, these are the things that I should be doing. I should be reading 10 pages a day. I should be working out. I should, meditate. I should journal. I should do all of these things. And then I should get ready, which I'm a woman. So doing my hair and putting my makeup on and getting dressed and all that, you got to allot an hour if you're not showering. If you're showering, like, oh, geez, here we go. It's going to take much longer. Back then, it took me much longer to get ready than it does today. But, all of these things. And what would happen was, regardless of when I woke up, I always felt behind the ball. Like I always felt like I should have been ahead. I should be at the office already. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. Like instead of giving myself the space to be in that moment and enjoying the book that I'm reading or the meditation I'm doing or the journaling I'm doing, it was just like a check. I got to do this. Check. I got to do that. I wasn't even present. And then I would get myself so worked up about like, I should be at work already, that I would get myself into this tizzy and then I would leave without eating breakfast or making a lunch. And then I'd be like, I'm at the office. And you know, the interesting thing is that nobody was waiting for me at my office. Not like I had an appointment at 9 a.m. Somebody was meeting me there and I'm rushing. It was this premise that somebody told me I should be at the office early and I should stay late. And I had that ingrained in me. So I'm there at the office. I'm the only one there and I'm doing whatever I do for work. And then now that I'm there, I can't leave. Like I just got here. So I can't leave even though I'm hungry. So then I just leave it longer and longer. And then I get busy with this and I forget about it and I get busy with that. And then come like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, I'm hangry because I have not paid attention to myself at all. So then the only option to give me what I need now, which is food in a hurry, is something that is fast and also really not that great for me, not nutritious, like none of those things that I really want. So I was in this pattern of putting myself last. But if I wouldn't have gotten into that space of being curious, like, why do I do this? Rather than you shouldn't be doing that, I would never have figured that out. Not only, like there was a lot of information that I unpacked in that super quick story of like I was bound by things I should be doing. I was energetically tapped because I was in this fight, flight, freeze, like this state of panic mode the moment that I woke up. Like these are things I need to deal with in my life at that moment that are pivotal to my success, and I wouldn't have caught it unless I was curious. So I love that, Hannah.
I love that. I love how you found all of those things, and I bet you kept budgeting because you didn't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
If you'd beat yourself up,
okay,
you would have missed all of that wisdom, and you probably would have quit budgeting because it made you feel bad.
Yeah. Or I just would have tried to like lay the hammer down. Like I can do this. And then I probably would have just like starved myself till 4 o'clock and then went home and ate quick or something. Like, I would have done things, just.
How interesting. Once we get into that habit of not taking care of ourselves, we'll take that to like the nth degree, won't we?
Of course. Yes. Yeah. It's brutal. We'll like die over it. No, I can't. I got to take care of everybody else.
But people do, like people get, so I wasn't diagnosed with anything. Like I went to the doctor and I was like, I'm not getting up. I'm not functional. They're, doing all the tests. There's nothing actually wrong with me, but I've worked with women who ended up in the ER, women who've manifested, serious illnesses in their lives as a result of buildup of stress over time because they felt like they had to, people please, be a perfectionist, overachieve, be busy all of the time, to prove that they're worthy. And I think that accepting that you're worthy because you are is, easier said than done, I think, for some of us. Totally. But yeah, and then treating yourself like, you are the most critical asset in your business, the most critical asset in your family, the most critical asset in your career, and investing appropriately and every single day in nurturing activities like, eating breakfast and, being present when you're doing your meditation, like you're doing all the right things. You're checking the boxes. Why is it going off? Yeah. And it just making that shift and realizing like, okay, I am worthy. I am the critical asset. If I'm not taking care of this, the rest is going to be impacted and possibly fall apart. So yeah, making that shift and prioritizing yourself, so critical.
Well, you also have to be willing to say that I am a priority. I think it's one of the reasons we get stuck in that loop is because on some level, we really not only are convinced that we shouldn't be a priority, but that we aren't, that we literally don't qualify as a priority.
Right. That's where we feel guilty for doing things like knitting or feel like we can't feed ourselves in reasonable timeframes because we have to do, like you're saying, the shoulds. Like I used to sit at my desk through lunch because I felt like I had to be seen, like all these expectations that, wherever we pick them up, the reality.
Have you ever figured out, I'm just kind of curious, it's really not all that important, but have you ever figured out who it was who was supposed to be actually seeing us do this stuff?
Yeah. The rest of the people sitting at their desks, not taking a lunch break.
Oh, okay.
It was a cultural thing.
No, I never figured out who they were. So it's kind of nice to know who they were that I was trying to please.
There was no one in my office when I was doing this, but they said I should be there.
Yeah, right.
Right. You got the
Yeah.
idea somewhere. It was in a book you
Yeah,
read. Who knows?
exactly. To be
I personally
successful,
think
you
they
must
have a
be.
lot to answer for, but that's
Yeah,
another
they
topic.
do. They do.
Well, we all
No.
get the programming, from all the different places, but like there's definitely, I'm in the US, I'm in Silicon Valley, there's an absolutely a hustle culture.
Absolutely.
And so being aware of the culture that you are in and its impact on your beliefs and therefore your behaviors is critical. Like, okay, is this good for my health?
Yeah.
How can I accommodate for this, and correct for it?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I think about with like setting boundaries and saying no is the judgment and justification. And it's interesting because you can practice saying no and leaning into the things that you want. And yet sometimes it's still hard to say no. I found myself struggling this last weekend. I literally felt like I was being bamboozled by my brother. He was like, hey, so I know you're a planner. This was actually Monday. I know you're a planner. So I just want to give you the plan and make sure it's okay with you. So I'm thinking that this is what we're going to do. We're going to take the horses. We're going to a parade this weekend with the horses. So we're going to go on Friday and then we're going to do free rides for people. And then you can sleep overnight because I need some family time because I'm going through a lot. And that would be nice. I'd just like to hang out with you. And then we'll do the parade on Saturday morning.
Very smooth, I must say. Yeah.
What?
Very smooth.
Very smooth.
Oh, yes.
Very smooth. Our family's really good at getting what we want. My brother included. I used to think it was just him, but I realized I have this talent too. I can't even say it's just him. It's both of us. And I'm like, I'm looking at the schedule and like the rodeo doesn't actually start until Saturday. So there's no rides to be given on Friday. I have no place to sleep, nor do I have desire, like when we're having an awful heat wave, to sleep in a tin can that doesn't have air conditioning. Like none of this is sounding good at all. I also don't want to give up my entire weekend doing free rides for what? Like what am I doing this for? Like I didn't even really want to go into the parade. I'm already anxious about the parade because we've got like 2 baby horses and I have no idea how this is going to go. Like they're only 2 months old and they've never seen that many people or cars or anything. Like I am already having nightmares about this entire situation. And then I was like really struggling with saying no. Like, I don't want to do this. There's nothing in me that says I want to give free rides on the hottest week of the summer so far for free to people that I used to go to high school with that I haven't seen in a really long time, which I really don't. I'm not even going to the rodeo because I don't want to. Like there's nothing about this that I want to do. But it's interesting because I had to call, like I sat on it for a really long time. Like all day I didn't answer my brother. And he's like, hello, are you listening? And like, come back to me. And I'm like, I don't really know how to do this. Like I had to call my husband and be like, hey, can I say no to this? And then I had to call my dad and say, I think Cody's trying to bamboozle me. And my dad's like, I don't know what that means, but I'm sure you're right. And I'm like, I don't really want to do this. And both my husband and my dad are like, then just say no. Like you didn't sign up for it. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. No, I don't want to.
Yes. But you did the most important thing. You paused.
Yes, I had to.
Yes.
But I felt like I really needed to like justify, and I really ruminated on it because I like me and my dad, backstory on this, me and my dad, we do like sleigh rides and wagon rides around Christmas time for like schools. And like we have Candy Cane Lane where it's all these houses that are lit up and like we get paid to do these kinds of things. And it's fun. It's one of the highlights of my life because I get to meet all of these really cool people and I'm with horses and I love doing that. And I love spending time with my dad. He's just got so much wisdom. So we end up having like these really in-depth talks for hours as we're going there and as we're coming home. And it's just this beautiful quality time and all of these things. So I'm like really like needling this, like it's like we're still giving rides. I'm not getting paid. So that's kind of a downfall. And like, do I really want to do this? Like, I don't really want to do this, but why don't I want to do this? because it's the false premise of spending time together. Like we're working. We're not going to be spending quality time together. Like you're just trying to bait and switch me, dude. I see you. I know that you just don't want to do it yourself, or you're just going to get me in there and I'm going to do it. And then you're going to go and do something else with somebody else. And like, that's just kind of how my brother works sometimes. So, but it was still really hard for me to say no. So I think that that's an important distinction, because even when you practice it and you start to put yourself first, which I feel like I have, sometimes it's still a struggle, right?
Yes. Saying no is something that was so hard for me. And I think part of the process of saying no is what you did, which is reach out to someone and like sanity check,
Yeah.
Am I the jerk in this situation, or is it okay to have this boundary? And I think that's where it's so powerful to work with coaches or therapists, or, have a dad or a best friend who has your best interest in mind. They don't have an agenda, to bounce these things off of, especially as we're growing in this way, because saying no is like, it's a skill. It's a skill. Some of us don't learn it as young adults or as children, and we have to learn it as adults, and it takes practice. And every new situation is a new way of practicing it. And sometimes we're a little caught off guard because there's maybe a guilt or something that tugs on our heartstrings a little bit, or something that comes up in a way that we weren't expecting. So I love that example.
I'm thinking to myself, as you guys were, especially as Jody Lynn was telling her story, I was thinking to myself, well, probably the best way to learn to say no is to be a boss. And then I instantly said, well, not necessarily. It could also be a great way to bury yourself, because if you're not really in that mode of saying, I can stand up for myself and say, no, I really don't want that to happen, you can end up in a really bad place because you as the boss are saying yes all the time.
Yeah. Trying to please everybody.
Yeah.
Yep. Gotta make those clients happy.
That's right. Gotta answer their phone call at 10 p.m.
Right. Never disappoint.
Yeah.
And so, being able to let other people be dissatisfied with the decision that you make is an area to.
That's a hard one.
Yes, like letting go of the people pleasing. You don't have to make everyone else happy. You're not responsible for their emotional reaction to your decision. You're responsible for your decision.
It's a hard
decision. That one's a hard one. Especially if you like, I don't know, I just want people to feel good. So that one's a hard one for me. Like I don't want to disappoint anybody. I want to make them happy. And I appreciate what you were saying earlier in this conversation of like, you need to fuel you need to take care of your biggest asset, which is you. And if you're not around to do these things, then like, if you continue to live this way, you're not going to be around to even say yes or to make them feel better. So you have to at some point draw that line and that boundary. But there's a lot of conversation in your own mind, like going on as you say these things. So I hope that the people that are listening appreciate or see that it's not just like, oh yeah, no, I'm good at it now. Like it's a practice. It's something that, we've been ingrained in saying yes to so many things that we have to practice and work at saying no and being okay with it.
Yeah. I think just approaching it like it's a new skill that you're learning. And that, the way I do things is like I get, there's templates, there's ways that you can practice saying no. There's conversation, strategic ways to have a conversation. That's, if it's in a work situation, you can say this or that, or this first, then that, or, well, here's how it will work. Would you like me to do, would you like to extend the timeline, or would you like to add more resources? And beginning to be able to have these strategic conversations. Like I was so afraid of doing this. I was afraid I was going to lose my job because I'd seen so many thousands of people laid off. But when I did start speaking up and having these conversations and saying no in strategic ways, I ended up getting promoted. And they gave me a team. They gave me more people to do the work. And
was
so,
that a shock?
Yeah, it was. I was like, wait, I can say no. Not only do I not get in trouble, I'm respected. Like, why didn't I do this earlier? My goodness. So saying no can result in really beautiful things in your life. And there are ways to do it. There are ways to say no that are very productive and helpful to even the people you're saying no to.
I got to experience that firsthand today. I've been playing chauffeur to my estimator. My estimator had a car crash, so she's currently without a vehicle. So the last couple of days I was driving around while she was doing her estimates and other tasks related to her job. And we went to visit a potential client who was really a lousy client for our business. It was not a good fit at all. And we're sitting there in his kitchen talking with him. And basically, she and I are both in the mindset that says, how quickly can we escape this situation without being rude about it? And I suspect that was going on in her mind. How do you say no to this guy? Because on top of everything else, he has pathos on his side, because he's this older guy who's dealing with COPD. He's about to go in for surgery, and he needs help with his gardens. And it's like, how do you say no to that? It's like, no, I can't say no to that, but you have to. Mm-hmm. And I know in my own case, if it was me who was saying it, I would have been much more abrupt about it than she was. She was so good about it. She found a very sympathetic way of essentially saying no without even saying no. I don't think she actually said the word no.
Yeah, that's a skill. It's a good one.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting, though. Interesting observation, because my husband and I were just talking about that last week. Like, he watched me dance around something and say no in a way that felt good to me, to somebody. And then he was like, why don't you just tell her off? Like, just tell her no. And I'm like, no, I don't. Like, I'm just different. I wouldn't be that abrasive or that abrupt. Like, he has that personality where people expect that from him. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I've learned to be more honest and upfront because of that skill that he has, but he just doesn't care if you like him or you don't like him. He's going to say what's on his mind. And I think that's beautiful. I just haven't gotten to that point. And I feel like I can get the same point across in a different way that's a little bit softer. And I wonder if that's just like a men and women thing.
It could be. I think it just depends on how, I guess, maybe part of it's personality. Maybe part of it is like, you mentioned, okay, raise my hand with a people pleaser. Like those of us who relate to those, like we call them success traps. It's a lot harder for us to potentially reject someone because we don't want to be rejected, you know? So I think some of the growth I've seen is like in practicing asking for something. And then, so you are being rejected and you realize, oh, it's not the end of the world, so I can reject others. Is also a part of it, because the same people who have a hard time saying no also have a hard time asking for what they want.
I think there might be something to what you're saying, Jody Lynn, in that just in the way that society, in effect, trains us about our gender roles is definitely going to play into that. I mean, I know that men are going to experience the challenge of saying no just as much as women will. It's not like, we aren't given a special get out of jail free card just by being male. It doesn't work that way.
Only one of us did.
I mean, I did, but no, it doesn't really do that.
No.
But what it does do is there is a certain empowerment in the often claustrophobic ways we're taught that males are allowed to behave. And one of them is to have a very strong belief in, well, you do it the way you need to do it, that kind of thing. And so that's how the no is able to come through. Whereas women are often taught, traditionally to be sweet, to be kind, all that. So, and being nice. That's probably, would you agree, Hannah, that nice is a trap?
Absolutely. It's actually one of the traps, being a nice girl, being afraid to say no is literally one of the success traps that drives people to burnout, because you are afraid of putting up those boundaries, of saying that no, and then you end up drained.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is I learned a long time ago the important distinction between nice and kind.
Yeah.
Because they really are quite different. And I think one of the biggest differences between nice and kind is nice tries to bend yourself to somebody else. Kind just tries to break the news in a way that's kind.
Right. One is compassion and the other is contortionism.
Yes.
I like that.
Compassion and contortionism. Yeah.
Stop being a contortionist unless you really want to be.
Yeah, like, you wanna ruin your life, perhaps?
Well, I mean, like, the thing about being nice in the way that we're talking about it, right? Where you're contorting yourself trying to make others happy is that you end up resenting other people and they can feel that. So
Totally.
you're not actually winning at anything. You're not making them happy. You're getting resentful. They're picking up on it and likely negatively impacting the relationship. So being the nice contortionist who never says no is not actually accomplishing the goal that you're setting out to accomplish, which is to belong, right? Which is to be loved, to be accepted.
Whereas being willing to say no, because that's what you learn directly in your job experience, being willing to
Mhm.
say no actually sets you apart as somebody who is capable of setting a boundary,
And
which is
therefore to be trusted.
exactly what when you're talking about promotion, that's one of the things that a manager is looking for. Is this somebody
Mm.
who can actually manage, who can actually, interact with somebody who is a subordinate and say, do this, not do this when you get a chance or do this when you feel like it, or
Please.
would you please, would you, it would be a real favor to me.
Oh, if
Just
you don't feel
do
like
it.
doing it, I'll do it for you in the wee hours of the morning. Yeah,
All
you don't
right.
want to get there.
Mhm.
In fact, as a male, one of my biggest challenges was learning how to make a demand like that, because that really is a demand. How to make that demand in a kind way. I kept trying to do what I heard others do, which was to do it in the nice way, and it always failed for me. I said, "Well, I know this doesn't work, but what does?" It took me a while to learn it. It took me a while to learn to just say, "Do this, please get this
Mhm.
done." Please and thank you actually did help. That made it a little bit easier for me. It was softened
Right.
like that. But
Nice.
yeah, to this day, I still struggle at times with the kind part. I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at it. Um, for me, it was never really difficult to say I don't want to go to that event that my brother wanted me to go to. Like, no, I really don't want to go, so I'm just going to say that. The harder part for me was figuring out how to say that in a way that wouldn't feel like I was bringing a sledgehammer on top of them.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, these things basically illustrate how easily we self-sabotage, how easily we beat the crap out of ourselves, how easily we set ourselves up for failure.
Remember not to judge. Approach it with curiosity.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And yet,
Look at me
and,
doing
and yet
this.
I had to admit, I mean, for my own case, I talked about, when my business crashed and I couldn't climb out, I was sabotaging myself every step of the way.
Because you didn't want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had to face that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also had a bigger problem after that. Once I finally faced it, well, what do I want to do? Now we're back to that first question all over again.
Yeah.
What is
Yep.
important to you?
I
Slow
faced that
down.
same thing. That's how I got here.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, that really is important. You have to know how to say what you want. You have to know, once you know what you want, you have to have some idea of how you want to get it. And then you actually have to stick to that. Why is that formula so difficult?
It's because I think we just get overwhelmed with all the demands, right? There's a lot going on in the world, and there's a lot of people that we're interacting with. And what I've noticed is there's no one holding space for my vision, right? I have a boss who has their vision. I have a husband who has his vision. I've got kids who have their needs. I have all of these people that I'm interacting with who have an idea of what they want. It's not necessarily my vision. Maybe my vision fits in there somewhere. And it's really easy if no one's holding space for you, no one's believing in your vision, and you haven't defined it and shared it with someone, and you don't have that support, to lose track of it and start paying more attention and more prioritization to other people's visions, because that's what's being thrust at you.
Right. Yeah. This has been a really good conversation. Really good. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, we never really brought this out, but you actually have a way of helping people self-identify whether they're on the road to burnout.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, burnout feels like, you wake up in the morning and you can't function, but really it's a long path. And there are a lot of signs and symptoms and red flags along the way. And it is so good to be able to call it before you get there. So I've got a quiz. It's called, the End Burnout Quiz. And you can find that at serenesuccess.net/quiz. And there you can, take the quiz, figure out where you are in your burnout journey, if at all, and what to do next in relationship to where you are to be able to turn that around.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say serenesuccess.net is also probably the best way to reach you.
Yes, it is. Yes.
It's usually a safe bet, but I thought I'd throw that out there. Really good stuff. A couple things we want to do before we finish up for today. First thing I want to do is to thank you for being on the show, and thank you for starting your podcast. I'm really glad that you're doing that. That's one of those things that, because I know from experience, I know Jody Lynn knows it too. It's one of those things where there's two hard things to do. The first one is to actually make the decision to do it, and then the second one is to actually do it for like the first few episodes. Lots of podcasts get started that don't actually keep going. So congratulations on making that decision to do that. But I also can tell you, I mean, you came onto our show. I'm sure you go on to other people's shows, and everybody who comes onto this show is a giver in one way or another. They've found something in their lives they want to share, and they go out and share it. And talk about the people pleaser side. One form of people pleaser is, and I don't mean this in a negative way, I mean this in a positive way, is I want to please other people by giving them this information that I picked up. And so we find all these different ways to go out there and share the information. And we go through courses that we create, through books that we write, through presentations we make, speeches that we give, all that kind of stuff that we post on social media. We write blog posts, and we put all this content out there. And I noticed a couple of years ago that we don't get a lot of credit for that. And I thought, well, that's something we need to kind of credit ourselves and each other for. So on behalf of those people you've never met, you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, who've been hearing your stuff, who've been picking up your content that you've been creating through other people's channels and through social media and so forth, on their behalf, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, Hannah, because you're making a difference in this world.
I love that. Well, thank you for saying thank you. What a beautiful sentiment. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. I noticed we don't get credit for that, and we need to take credit for stuff.
Yeah, the creators. Yeah.
Because we are making a difference in ways that we'll never find out about, but we're still making the difference. So yeah, that's why I'm going to make it a point to do that. And then one last thing, then this is something that we always do at the end. I have 3 great co-hosts, Jody Lynn being one of them, and you've gotten a very good sense of just how great she is as a co-host. But I ask each of my co-hosts at the end of a show to kind of summarize what's the big takeaway, what's the one thing that kind of ties the whole conversation together. And Jody Lynn's really damn good at this, so I can hardly wait for the answer. But Jody Lynn's already been thinking about. Jody Lynn, what's the takeaway today?
I've got a couple. There's a lot, actually. I think that it's really easy in our society today to get stuck in those success traps and to fall into somebody else's vision or version of success. And I think you get to a point at your life, whether it's through burnout or through age or through something, where you realize that life is too dang short, and that what you're doing, Hannah, really is you're reminding people that they have an opportunity, they have a choice to make, to step back into alignment with what their heart really, truly desires, and to watch that beautiful unfolding of where they're meant to go. So thank you for that reminder today.
Wow, what a beautiful summary. Thank you, Jody Lynn.
Yeah, I told you she's good at this. She's really, really good at it.
All the pressure.
and I'll have to be honest, Hannah, I love putting that pressure on because I love the way she just responds to it. It's
raises up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just keep ratcheting it up. And she always
here for it. Keep showing up every week.
So Hannah Tackett, thank you so much for joining us and for telling your story and for sharing these ideas and so forth. We wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. Such an honor to be here, and quite fun too.
Good. Well, that's why we call it your daily dose of happy. So thank you for contributing to the happy. Yay. Love that so much. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody. Oops.